Yo, we ready to get right into it. I was watching Friday Night SmackDown. I stopped, man. They tried to get me with another women's match. We don't care about those. Um, anyways, let's get right into it. Here we go.
Sponsored by Squarespace, the ultimate all-in-one platform to help you design your own personal, professional-looking website. The original Toy Story trilogy is a masterpiece amongst animation trilogies, and a huge part of why that is are the two sequel films and their excellent villains. Today I'd like to shine a spotlight on the best villain of this franchise, and the second best villain of Pixar's entire catalog in my opinion, only beaten by Syndrome. Lotso Huggin' Bear. And as for the other villain, I already covered Stinky Pete in my Toy Story 2 video, and Toy Story 3 is a movie I haven't had the opportunity to express my love for yet, and I felt making a video based primarily on Lotso would be fitting, as many of the best elements of this film revolve around him and his story. And most of the other best parts are the parts of this movie that get talked about the most by other people, such as the ending with Andy and Bonnie, which is of course great, but it's not the only reason this movie is a masterpiece. So anyway, without further ado, I present why Lotso is a terrifying and outstanding villain. One of the first major things I'd like to mention about Lotso that makes him so great is how he is one of the most cruel, despicable, and evil characters ever put into an animated film, and yet he appears as a kind, cuddly pink teddy bear. And he loves hugs. But I think his love of hugs might have more to do with always wanting everyone to be within his grasp than him actually liking anyone. I'm a huge fan of villains that deceive people into thinking they are good people, or at least wish to appear so to disguise their evil deeds. Whether it is because they actually believe they are good people, or they simply want to trick people into thinking they are, it always makes them that much more easy to despise. Because you have to wonder how many people they have successfully convinced they were a good person to. Well, in this case, we don't have to guess, since we can see the huge number of toys who support Lotso here. And speaking of those toys, that's another reason I love Lotso as a villain so much, since he is basically a criminal mastermind with an army of brainwashed soldiers and slaves at his fingertips. Lotso's control of the other toys is a huge reason as to why he's so scary and intimidating. Their eyes are his eyes, and it's like you cannot escape his vision. He always knows what is happening in the daycare, and if you upset him, he will know and act accordingly, probably before you have any time to react. Escaping the place is almost impossible because of this factor alone, not to mention all the other traps and roadblocks he has installed. One of the scariest things about Lotso's minions is how he has convinced all these other toys that he is right and made them into villains as well, even if they themselves aren't cruel or mean like he is. Lotso's army of toys follow his ways because they don't want to be seen as lesser. Lotso has created an elite system where you can be right up there next to him, but only a few can hold those positions. But he makes the other toys believe it is possible to one day be treated with enough respect if they survive the suffering long enough. This is why so many of the toys are loyal to him, because they don't ever want to go back to being treated that way by the young kids instead of being played with by the nice kids. And the ones who know the true horrors he inflicts are too afraid to speak out because of fear of what he might do to them. They just try to hide and accept their fates. And Lotso has done an excellent job with making these other toys believe that following him is actually good and the best thing they can do for themselves and their way of life. Lotso does this by using logic to back up his flawed worldview, making it more believable to those he tries to manipulate. He tells them that they are all destined to be thrown away and treated as garbage, and because the toys know that this has happened to others, they can't exactly deny it. The other toys see Lotso as an intelligent leader with wisdom, and he can fake this air because of his own experiences and trauma, which comes through in almost everything he says, whether or not he pretends to be nice. He projects his traumatic experiences onto everyone else and tries to convince them that the terrible things that happen to him will inevitably happen to everyone, and that because of this, he is the only one they can trust. This brings me to the source of Lotso's trauma, his abandonment and self-destructive epiphany. Lotso's backstory is actually quite similar to Jesse's, with how he was once loved by a kid, Daisy, but later forgotten and abandoned. Though unlike Jesse, his abandonment was a mistake and not intentional. And worse still, Lotso tried so hard to get back to his owner, only to find out the hard truth. that as a toy, he is not distinctly individual to a child. A child can only see the exterior of a toy, and not who they are on the inside, though Daisy never could have known what replacing him would do. And most likely, it was not even her choice to replace him in the first place. Her parents probably just bought her a replacement Lotso because she loved him so much, and to her, they are the same exact thing. She probably didn't even know that Lotso was completely lost and abandoned, assuming that her parents simply found the old one, completely oblivious to the consequences that would come from all this. As Toy Story 2 showed us with the alternate Buzz Lightyear, a toy can look outwardly the same as another, yet grow to form their own distinct personality, as Lotso has here, so his abandonment struck harder due to his unique attachment to his child that she could never have known. And on top of it all, he was the only one of the 3 toys left behind to be replaced, which to Lotso meant that Daisy's love was always shallow and fake, and she never really loved him or any of the other toys. As if she could so easily replace him, then she could surely not value the others she didn't even replace anymore. One thing I love about this is how Lotso's experience is shaped by how a young child treats a toy. Something which is vastly different from how an older child, teen, or adult would treat the same toy. Because eventually, people do grow attachments to specific toys that a replacement could never have. A toy you've had as long as you can remember is not the same as one which you just bought the other day. This is part of why the dynamic between Lotso and Woody is so good, because Woody knows for a fact that Andy loves his toys as more than just toys, but as a personal part of his childhood and who he is, and thus Woody refuses to give up on him. Man, all this talk of Lotso getting abandoned is very sad. Oh, I know, to cheer you all up, I'll tell you about a website building tool you'll never want to abandon.
Squarespace, Squarespace, Squarespace. That amazing online ultimate website designing toolkit. It makes it super easy to design your website with a
is correct, and that is part of what makes him so dangerous, but also what makes the struggle between him and Andy's toys so strong, as they eventually come to realize, once again, that Woody is right, and that Lotso's crooked twisting of other people to believe he is right must end. Let me rewind a bit though. As I mentioned before, Lotso's backstory is similar to Jesse's, and I like that for multiple reasons. Firstly, because it helps tie the whole trilogy and its themes together by showing us even more ways in which these toys' lives can be affected in ways we humans never considered with the actions we take in real life. Really toying with our emotions once again, but in the most interesting of ways. And secondly, because it shows us how strong Jessie actually is, that she managed to eventually move on and not let her trauma define her, finding happiness again with Andy and later Bonnie. While Lotso chose to instead become bitter and never let go of his bad experiences, forcing them onto other people to make himself feel better. Speaking of which, Lotso is not content with how horrible his life was and that no one seems to care or feel the same way he does. He doesn't want to accept that he was the only one who was replaced.
She replaced us! She replaced you! And if you couldn't have her, then no one could!
He could never believe that someone like himself, who was the most loved, and had the closest thing to a special connection, could be replaced and no one else could be. Because he was treated as trash, he has convinced himself that every toy will also be treated as trash, and he has made his followers believe that this is true. Of course, this often isn't the case for some toys who are genuinely loved and respected, but Lotso cannot stand the idea that his life is or was worse than anyone else's. So to fuel his delusional worldview, he forces the other toys to experience a sample of what he claims. He does this by putting the other toys through the ringer in the caterpillar room. Watching other toys experience pain from kids who don't truly love them makes him feel superior for being played with by nice kids, the type of which he wished he had for an owner long ago. And he gets away with it on the basis of claiming it's only fair that the older toys such as himself get an easy job, while the new, fresh toys have to do the hard stuff.
For the good of our community, we ask the newer toys, the stronger ones, to take on the hardships the rest of us can't bear anymore.
This also benefits him because it forces the other toys to experience the roughness of young children and question their potentially fragile existence. Lotso desperately wants all the other toys to believe they have no value, because it is easier to manipulate a person who can't see their own worth or stand up for themselves than someone who does see their own worth and can stand up for themselves. One of my favorite things about Lotso's doom and gloom trash talk is how it ties back to the warnings of Stinky Pete in Toy Story 2.
How long will it last, Woody? Do you really think Andy is going to take you to college? or on his honeymoon. Andy's growing up, and there's nothing you can do about it.
How he warned Woody that if he chose to go back to his kid, he wouldn't last forever and would eventually be thrown away. All this brings us to the truly dark side of Lotso. When his manipulation and false kindness fails, the real monster comes out. Lotso is a dangerously intelligent villain. He knows when the time for fakery is over and force is needed. Lotso's philosophy is that if you don't join him in his worldview, then you must suffer until you understand the alternative. I also like that Lotso uses Woody's hat to make the other toys believe he is even more dangerous than he is. And he is already very dangerous. Another disturbingly realistic side to all this comes in the form of Barbie, in how Ken essentially saves her from all the initial suffering by Lotso's hand, and later from the prison, showing the unfair nature of reality, that some people are spared suffering because of biases and personal connections that most people don't have. Unfortunately for those who do not have such luxuries, they are put through some of the worst things a person must endure. Firstly and most obviously, the terrible playtime. And when you're not suffering through the worst playtime of your existence, you're locked inside a cage and guarded, with virtually no freedoms remaining whatsoever. Even the ability to talk is all but taken away from you. The worst part of all this is that Lotso hasn't actually changed their situation. They still must be played with by the children who treat them terribly on a daily basis. Only now they have no freedoms whatsoever unless they convert to Lotso's way of life, or become so broken that they are little more than an empty husk, or just straight up trash and thrown away. But Lotso could so easily change the toy's situation for the worse, as he does with Mr. Potato Head, by putting him in what is essentially solitary confinement. This method being designed for those particularly opposed to his views, toys he can label as disturbers of the peace to justify his cruel actions. This is a tactic he uses only if he must, for doing so might make him appear less well-meaning than he wants to appear. This is part of the reason why he has his minion toys do most of the dirty work for him, so that he can use them as a scapegoat if someone claims he is cruel. He'll just blame the other toys for being harsher than he intended. Lotso's methods are strong, but clever toys like Buzz and the phone manage to get around his security or tight control. Unfortunately, even then, Lotso manages to get to both of them, using tactics inspired by his low valuing of others to tamper with Buzz forcefully, treating him like a tool instead of a person, and doing something most likely unspeakable to the phone so that he can learn of the escape route and stop Andy's toys at all costs. Considering this phone has been through terrible things before, and only at the end is broken by Lotso, I can only imagine the true terror Lotso is capable of when truly enraged. All this, of course, to say that even if you're smart or strong, Lotso can still get to you in the end, making him that much more terrifying. Additionally, Lotso's extremely high security setup and system is just another branch of his extremely hard-coded belief in his worldview. He wants people to see the world the way he does so badly that he refuses to let them escape or view their existence in any way other than how he permits it. Unfortunately though, for Lotso, Woody and the others' influence on the place would eventually lead to his downfall as cruel master of the daycare, as Woody's genuine heartfelt belief in what is right and the love of all toys and their owners is able to convince many of Lotso's most loyal followers to abandon their trust in him. And Lotso's bitter rage in this moment is one of the most chilling and ultimately satisfying moments in film, when Baby turns on him and chucks him to the very fate he claimed they were all destined for.
This is what happens when you dummies try to think. We're all just trash, waiting to be thrown away. That's all a toy is.
I love how this shows that it doesn't matter how much someone else tells you that you are valueless. You will always have worth, even if they can't see it. Baby's rebellion here is so satisfying because he had been living as a slave to Lotso and treated as worthless his whole life, and finally chooses to reject that lie once and for all when Lotso disrespects the memory of the good times that he once had, acting like they meant nothing. Lotso, however, is not finished just yet and decides to drag Woody and company down with him. What I love most about Lotso's part here at the end is how he fakes to be helpless and in need when they are on the path to their doom. He manipulates Woody's kindness to save himself, and when the moment comes for him to repay that kindness, he leaves the toys for dead, deliberately lying that he would help them only to save himself once again. But it's more than just that. He didn't just leave them for dead to save his own cotton, but because saving their lives would validate Woody's worldview, that toys have value and meaning. Leaving them for dead, however, backs up his own point of view, that toys are trash and were always destined to be thrown away and die, and nothing of worth comes from their existence. His pettiness is unmatched, in that he values his own false worldview above the lives of all the other toys. And so, it is because of all this, that his final punishment is one of the most satisfying of all, as he is found by a man who simultaneously values him and wishes to keep him forever, but also treats him like trash without even realizing. And so he got exactly what he wanted, the love of an owner and the ability to live out the rest of his life in his firmly believed worldview, suffering as a piece of junk on the front of a truck with absolutely no worth or freedoms granted, but loved too much to be let go. So, long story short, don't treat people like trash, and they probably won't treat you like trash in return. And we must also learn to accept that sometimes bad things happen, and we have to move on. So this way we don't end up like Lotso in the end.
Hey, I see you over there. It's not time to skedaddle just yet. I first need to know what you think of Lotso in the comments down below.
No, it's time to get out of here.